Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, August 20th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Ball State game in 16 days, the game against Michigan in exactly 100 days. Thanks today to our friends at Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed U.S.D.A. prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. All right, I'm joined by Marcus Hartman of BuckeyeInsiders.com. We just got a chance to talk to running backs, tight ends, and some interesting stuff, not necessarily about those specific positions, a little bit on the running backs we'll get to later in the show. Most interesting stuff was some more big picture stuff, because Isaiah West we got a chance to talk to him. We talked to Bo Jackson earlier in the fall, got a chance to talk to Isaiah West and Jacoby Jackson on Wednesday, and he had a very interesting answer about the offense and maybe what's a little different this year.
Yeah, Isaiah, he's very confident. He's got a deep voice and he delivers his answers, so it's kind of interesting. But he used his hands to emphasize Arthur Smith has a plan and a structure to the offense, which I think you can't help but take it like maybe last year they didn't have that much of a plan and a structure. He said they're not running 1,000 different plays, and it's more a few basic concepts that they can then kind of branch out of, which is not a huge surprise. I think from what we know about Arthur Smith and what we've seen, I think you can take from what we've seen, last year they ran a lot of zone, they ran a lot of power and things off of that. And I'm a personal fan of power and doing different things, but I think this year we're going to see them be back more into leaning into zone and doing things off of that. I also think that, Bo Jackson, I think, was much better at zone than he was at anything else, and he was better at zone than anybody was at anything else. I think last year, I don't know. And then West, kind of, you can see where he would be a one-cut type of a guy, but I think he could be either one. So that was kind of the most interesting thing that he said. And first, everything he didn't mean to, but it did sound like he was casting aspersions at Brian Hartline, and for better or for worse. And I think, again, I felt all along, they hired a guy who used to be a head coach as an offensive coordinator, but I really thought if you took what they were doing last year, and I've thought this many times over the last 20 years, and you truly just actually hired a consultant, and it was like a real consultant who knew what they were doing, not someone who's just stealing money, and they just said, no, cut this out, do this more, put this here. I think what they were doing last year was fine if they just refined it, but then they brought in a former head coach, so they're getting that on steroids, and it sounds like he's making plenty of changes, and it helps that he knows what he's doing.
Well, and it's kind of interesting that 3 of the last 4 offensive coordinators Ryan Day has hired were former NFL head coaches. Bill O'Brien, who did the basically William Henry Harrison term at Ohio State before leaving to take the head coaching job at Boston College. Chip Kelly. Then you have Brian Hartline, who's never called plays before, and then now Arthur Smith. And it feels like this is Ryan Day looking and going, well, here are the things that were beneficial. Because I think during Bill O'Brien's brief tenure at Ohio State, he did kind of do the consulting thing where he looked at the previous year's film and went, okay, here's what I'm seeing from the outside with having done this for a while. And having Arthur Smith come in and do that is it seems like that's going to be beneficial. I do want you to expand a little bit for people who don't understand what makes someone a better running back for a zone-based offense versus maybe more of a power scheme or a man block.
Well, the zone, I think it's more specialized for guys who are good at zone, I think, than guys who are power. Because with the power, a lot of times you're just supposed to trust the hole is there, and then you run through it. And so anybody can do that, in my estimation, although some guys are better at it than others. The zone, it's a little more, there's a real feel to it, and being able to kind of hit the hole at just the right time. And because the hole is just sort of in an area. It's not necessarily you cut off of this guy's butt and he's always going to be right here. And so, again, and honestly, the big thing was if you just watched last year, they kind of struggled to run the ball, and then Bo would come in and they would just give him the ball off the guard, and he would squirt through the hole, and he would have it was kind of a revelation. On the strength of the opposition wasn't necessarily the same there at the beginning, but that's why I think just from what we've seen with Bo, he's just sort of a feel runner like that. And you talk about being a big guy a bigger guy like West. Again, maybe once he kind of gets all that weight going one way, and then you make one cut and get it going the other way. I think that works pretty well for him. So I think that's why he said it kind of fits those guys. It makes sense that it would fit with those guys, and it's also up to Laughlin to coach him up on that. But if I remember correctly, I mean, I think at his previous stop, I think they were doing a lot of zone at Oregon too. So I mean, it's most teams do both, and it's a matter of what they major in. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of Power, Jim Tressel's favorite play in the Ohio State offense even this coming year, but it looks like they want to major in that, and that's from what we've seen and what the guys have talked about. That's kind of how it feels.
All right, so maybe they're getting a little away from Power, but they are going to be looking at more under center, so not getting completely away from the Jim Tressel era just yet. There was some other interesting stuff that we heard from Bennett Christian, because one of my favorite things is when players on one side of the ball get asked about the other side of the ball. And this was sort of a spin on that. Normally it's you asking the offense, hey, what have you seen out of the defense or this position group on the defense or whatever as you're going up against them during practice every day. This was a little bit of a different thing where he ended up talking about some feedback that he got from the defensive side of the ball about this year's offense.
Yeah, Bennett Christian said he asked Peyton Pierce kind of what he sees. He's the middle linebacker with the number one defense. What does he see from what they're doing offensively? And he said basically like, I don't know, I can't tell what you're doing. Given it's going to be super confusing. So other teams that aren't practicing against it, he feels like it'll be extra confusing. And if you kind of extrapolate off of what Isaiah had said, and if you look at the way the zone schemes typically work, is it does a lot of stuff that looks similar. They're doing a bunch of different plays, but especially to the layman's eye, a lot of stuff is pretty similar. Then they'll, if you get down into it, they're coaching different techniques, and each guy's job will vary a little bit, and it depends on what the defense is doing. But I mean, from the average fan, even the average fan who wants to know more, you can kind of. It's going to look similar, and then it's up to them to kind of make it work. And obviously, but that also, from what Bennett is saying, that translates to the average middle linebacker who's trying to interpret what the defense is or what the offense is doing as well. So that's another reason that, and we could be completely wrong about this, but to think that maybe they're going to be a little more focused on a few concepts that they can then expound off of. And no matter what, it sounds like for sure they're going to, like I said, I think just having a better plan, even for some of the same things, sometimes you can't overemphasize how much difference that can make.
Yeah, and if you think back through different types of college football teams, this is not like a unique thing with, this only happens in the run game. Like the service academies, their triple option, it's generally small iterations on relatively small number of concepts, but almost an infinite number of small iterations on that. Mike Leach with the air raid would run like 4 plays, but it was just different iterations of those specific plays. It reminds me a little bit of pitch tunneling in baseball, where if you're a pitcher and you've got a good fastball and a great curveball, that's great. If those two pitches can look the same for the first 30 feet on the way to the plate, that makes it way harder for the defense to pick it up, or for the batter to pick it up. This might be the same thing where, you're okay, they're going to run outside zone here, but they're going to block it slightly differently, or they're going to have, they're going to pick a different target or whatever. That feels like, we always talk about finding ways to make it simple for you and complicated for the opposing team, whether that's disguising coverages on defense or, in this case, on offense. That feels like that's really the goal for what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much exactly the same thing from the tunneling standpoint. When again, because that also brings it down to a couple of things that it could be, but it only has to be more than one thing, and it becomes a lot more difficult to read. And it's just changing what their keys are for the defense, or eliminating the keys basically, but not changing the basic job that much for. Like I said, with the triple option, again, like you can be running the same setup where you fake the dive, but the coaches who are really experts in it will change the blocking scheme, and then you won't notice this if you're just the average person, but they'll change okay, we're going to option this guy, we're going to option this guy, we're going to double this guy, and it's very hard to tell what the difference is from 1,000 feet away, but it makes a huge difference, especially if to keep the defense off balance, which I think that's another thing. You get down to last year, obviously the number one problem, especially against Miami, was the defense never really looked off balance. I mean, they were able to kind of play downhill and attack them from the beginning of the game, and maybe that was because some things they saw in the scouting report. I mean, maybe it had nothing to do with that, but maybe they got some extra time to prepare, and they were able to kind of figure out what Ohio State was going to do. Maybe there were tendencies, I don't know, and maybe again Ohio State was sort of a jack of all trades, master of none last year, and it sounds like they're probably going to have the opposite approach this year.
So I'm already, as we're just talking about this, I'm already excited to get onto the Insiders board at BuckeyeInsiders.com and start talking about this stuff with Ross and Michael, who are our scheme insiders, because this feels like, this is the stuff where they're going to excel, where it's like, okay, what's the little thing that they're doing differently here? Why did this one go for 40 yards, whereas the last 3 only went for 4? I'm super excited to find that kind of stuff out this year. I'm going to guess Matt Patricia is going to have some different stuff cooking up on the defensive side of the ball as well. We'll be talking about all of that with our members at BuckeyeInsiders.com. That's where Tony and I are your team insiders. We got Marcus covering basketball. He's our basketball insider, but he's at football, obviously, as well with us. Don't you worry. We got Chuck, he's our recruiting insider, and we got Ross and Michael, they're our scheme insiders, plus a really fun and active community on the Insiders board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. And speaking of Jeff Ruby's Columbus, thank you to them for, once again, sponsoring today's show. They are the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.